So, sure. So it's great to see such an audience here that doesn't even fit the room that is interested in the Bitcoin. And my first friend, then a guest, is Michael Shim, who came all the way from Silicon Valley here to Vilnius just for this conference. We've known my Shim for years, back since mobile days. He was heading mobile at Yahoo, and then later he became a VP of Groupon. And then he started to also invest in the companies. So he's actually actively investing in Lithuanian companies. And the first questions, well, apparently, Mike, would be great for you just to tell a little bit about yourself, like what brings you here. And also, just tell us a little bit what's like why Silicon Valley is so hot about the Bitcoin.
Well, I'm here for the ice cream, actually. I'll tell a funny story about how. So Ilya and I have known each other for many years. When we were both in the mobile industry, which I think is a really interesting analog, or at least something to think about when we're thinking about disruptive technologies like blockchain. I mean, mobile, I think, is probably one of the most disruptive and far-reaching technologies that we've seen in the last 10 years. But that's how we met. And the funny story is we were having dinner. I think it was in London after a conference, and Ilya was really passionate about how much he hated American ice cream. And I was really struck by how he was just so passionately talking about this, and continued to rant about how they didn't Americans don't use real milk. What they use is like skim stuff. So I was fascinated by that very impassioned plea. And when Ilya asked me several years later, hey, would you come out to Lithuania to check out the startup scene and the technology scene out here, the first thing I said, and can I have some ice cream, please? So let me start by just doing a little overlay on what Ilya was saying about sort of why I'm interested in this part of the world as an investor. And so I'm an entrepreneur and an investor in early stage companies. I've worked at big companies like Yahoo and Groupon, and I've started a couple companies, and recently I've been investing companies on my own, as well as co-investing with a number of funds, mostly in Silicon Valley. In fact, Armin and I occasionally sit next to each other at Jerry Yang's venture firm. We're ex-Yahoos as well, so we get the benefit of seeing, frankly, a lot of interesting companies come through those doors. And I would say, so to me, Lithuania is an interesting place for startups, but also in fintech, for a couple reasons. One is I think there's a lot of technical talent that I have seen and met. I spent some time yesterday with two bright and energetic founders who are passionate about trying to build a blockchain-based remittance business. And I think it's exemplary of the kinds of people that you tend to see, particularly folks, the younger folks who are interested in startups. The second thing is I do think in the case of Lithuania, small is beautiful when you're thinking about starting companies in a complex, highly regulated space like financial services. So just to be clear, I'm not a Bitcoin evangelist like that in the way that you've seen a lot of people talk about earlier. I'm an opportunist in the sense that I love to find founders and businesses that could potentially change how we do business and potentially create a lot of value. And I see that potential here in Lithuania because I think when you combine technical talent, you combine an ecosystem that is sort of interested in building sort of the next generation of startup companies in Lithuania, and then frankly, an openness on the part of the authorities, the regulators and the government, to embrace this new technology and to support it. I think that's really interesting and exciting times for an investor.
Well, like Lithuania is always looked at Silicon Valley as the bleeding edge of innovation. So the latest and greatest happens there. Apparently, all the Facebooks and the Groupons and Yahoos appear there and become big. And here from a distance, it looks like Silicon Valley is getting pretty much excited about the Bitcoin. So what's there? Why do you think is going on?
Yeah, I think someone else made the comment earlier about the excitement, and particularly amongst developers, about this interesting technology. So, like many people, who are not approaching this from a developer standpoint, I first became interested in Bitcoin, 3 years ago, when I was, hearing, sort of these very passionate communities of people all over the world that are literally working on an open protocol on a total volunteer basis, and coming out of that is creating some interesting tools, and now some interesting businesses that are trying to take advantage of these tools. I think the reason why the Valley, Silicon Valley, and folks who are early adopters of technology are interested about the Bitcoin phenomenon and working on Bitcoin is that for a couple reasons. One is, I think it has the potential to solve some real problems, whether it's looking at it from the enterprise standpoint or whether it's looking at it from the consumer standpoint, is one. I think secondly, and this is where a lot of great technologies have this dynamic, is that you have both missionaries and mercenaries who are involved with this technology. So early on in my career, I had an opportunity to have to spend some time with John Doerr, a famous venture capitalist at Kleiner Perkins, and he sort of coined this term of how the internet was built by both missionaries and mercenaries. Missionaries who believe that the internet was essential to distribute information to anyone who wanted it around the world, and mercenaries who realized, wow, we can make a buck out of that. And I think that's one of it's the same dynamic is sort of playing out, I think, in this space. So the broader sort of blockchain-based Bitcoin startup space, which is, you have a lot of people that are looking at the idea of a public ledger and a currency that's built on top of that public ledger that's not controlled by any government, that frankly can fix a lot of the problems that you see with governments that are that essentially control the value of their own currency. And I would say those people aren't necessarily looking at it as a business opportunity so much as they're looking at it as this is a new world order. Now, I think my personal view is I think it's great to have ideas of making the world better, but I do think that the other reason why Silicon Valley is now supporting this is that there's an opportunity to build some really big businesses around it. So when you sort of combine the fact that you've got sort of a hardcore group of developers that are passionate about what they're working on for its own sake, and you realize that these developers are also creating technologies and tools that that can be the bases for products and customers. That's when the Valley gets really excited, and that's the reason why there's been, I think in 2015 there's been about $1 billion in venture capital that was plowed into Bitcoin and blockchain-based businesses. Now, I do note that not a single one of those companies, to my knowledge, was in Lithuania. There are a number of blockchain Bitcoin startups throughout Europe. Some of them have raised successive rounds of venture financing. And I think that's a real opportunity, or frankly, it's a missed opportunity that I think, conferences like this and involvement by developers and business people and folks in government, it's an opportunity that they have to change. Frankly, this year I think there ought to be one or two investments in Lithuania in this space. I mean, judging by the excitement in this room and judging by the sheer interest level that's represented by all of you who have come to this conference.
Well, you mentioned 1 billion invested in 2015 in just Bitcoin companies. It's a huge number. Apparently, Lithuania would be happy to have a portion of that. In a slice, which we're preparing for. I know, question to you. I know that you had some discussion with like really big whales in the both Bitcoin investment world and then the just general investment community that basically have spent like hundreds of millions of dollars on the Bitcoin investments. And I know that you did talk about, say, potential Lithuania as a place. Like, what's your impression? Like, does Lithuania has a chance of attracting the whales? Like, having a big slice of that 1 billion? Like, do we have practical opportunity? What should we do for that as a country?
I think the short answer is yes, but it won't happen overnight.
No tomorrow, no money.
So tomorrow, I don't think you're going to have a plane full of venture capitalists coming here, writing 7, 8, 9-figure checks. I do think, though, that just to camp on to something I said earlier is when you really think about, even though the technology inherently is global, to me, businesses are inherently local because businesses sell to customers, and it's really impossible for a business to not think of how they run their business without having thinking about the markets for those businesses, whether it's in Lithuania or Palo Alto. Now that being said, I do think that there is this notion of developers and cities, communities that have some comparative advantage in certain sectors. And so I'm coming back to this notion that, early on when we were looking at sort of spaces or industries that were interesting to us in Lithuania, financial services really bubbled to the top of the list. And I do think that, from what I've learned with all the activity that's already here, technical talent, you've got, large global financial institutions that have frankly hired and trained thousands of people here, and then combined with the fact that you've got an openness within, again, back to the regulatory environment, an openness within the government to not only learn about Bitcoin and blockchain, but also someone's having a good time back there. But also do things to actively support. I mean, frankly, all the folks within the government that are here in this room, to me, is a really big endorsement of the fact that there are folks within government circles that are interested in learning more about Bitcoin and ways to support it. So, I know that's sort of not quite the answer maybe that folks in this room were looking for, but what I would say is from everything that I've seen, there is enough of the raw materials, and I think raw materials for there to be an interesting community of entrepreneurs and investors that are focused on Bitcoin here in Lithuania. And the next step would be to make sure that, that to the extent that the government or the community can help, foster the growth and of those entrepreneurs and investment community. I think that's really the opportunity that you all have in this room.
Well, Mike, it's great that not only you're talking about Lithuania, say, being potentially investor friendly, et cetera, but you're writing personal checks. So as I know, you're writing a second investment into a second Lithuanian company in the course of a year. So by putting your personal money here in Lithuania, like across the whole globe, apparently you're sending a very strong message, saying not only I like rhetorically believe, but I'm willing to support my words with my personal money and check. So, and again, if your first investment could have probably be seen like just testing waters and just seeing what happens, second check actually is even a stronger proof. So my question to you is, what do you find positive about your experience of working with Lithuanian companies and investing here? And what do you believe should change so that would encourage even more checks coming from you and the other investors?
Let's see. Let's break that down. So I think the first question is, well, the last question is probably the most important, which is how do we encourage more investment here?
Totally.
So let's take the most important question first. I think that so and I have to be honest, like I'm a little bit I'm a bit conflicted on this, because one of the reasons why I think it's a tremendous opportunity as an investor, particularly early stage investor, in being here is that I'm not here with 10,000 of my best friends who are also early stage investors. So I think there's a little bit of a quality of trying to be ahead of the curve that is a draw for me personally, just to be very honest. I mean, people ask me all the time, well, especially like coming up to this trip, like this is your second trip to Lithuania, like what's going on over there? And so I think for me personally, it is absolutely, I'm coming to my own sort of assessment on the potential that is here, and I'm making an investment, not only with dollars, but also by spending time and getting to meet people here. But to answer the question in a non-conflicted way, I think there's really two things need to happen. I think the high-quality developers and entrepreneurs that want to build valuable businesses need to be supported and come forward, one. And I think it's a two-way street. I think having investors here looking for those people helps. But frankly, I think getting the message out that, that people that want to go try a startup and supporting those people, I think is important. And that's a broader question than something that a bunch of investors or politicians or business people can solve. That's really I think it's a cultural phenomenon. It's in the Valley. There's one of the great things about the Valley is that risk taking is actively encouraged. Failure is not discouraged. It's an opportunity to learn from mistakes, right? So on the one hand, I think there's just from the ground up, I think there could be a lot done to support these founders that are looking to start businesses. I think the second important thing too is I think government does play a role here, and government plays a role in this blockchain and Bitcoin space, probably in more ways than in other industries. And so I think that to the extent that you have folks who are able to incentivize startup creation, or at a minimum don't pass laws that make it difficult for founders to run their businesses, I think that's very important. And I was curious because Ilya and I were just talking just before this conversation. I would love to get a sense in this room of how many people are Bitcoin blockchain developers. So like I'm just very curious because this conference is a little bit broad ranging for a reason, but could I just get a show of hands for folks who are developers? Okay, terrific. And how many folks are in the financial services industry? And how many folks are in neither and just are really curious about what's happening with this Bitcoin blockchain thing? Okay, so I mean, by the show of hands, you've got, this is pretty representative, right? You've got, I think, a core group of developers, a smaller group of developers who actually, work with the blockchain protocol. You got a lot of interested parties in financial services that understand that this is a, technology with high potential, and then you've got a bunch of people frankly, who are just interested in what's happening. And those people are important down the road because they're going to be customers, right? So, I think to answer your question, what's needed for those dollars at the end of the day is exposure, support for founders, and government that's willing to lean forward, and work to make sure that they're creating a very fertile regulatory environment.
Since you touched a little bit the core developer group, the startups, and apparently you are investing in the companies here, like a question being discussed quite often is, are Lithuanians entrepreneur themselves? Because it's slightly cultural. There's an opinion that it's a different mentality. People in Silicon Valley or like Israel, etc., are just like fundamentally different. So maybe not Lithuanians are the best entrepreneurs. And now you've apparently worked, felt, talked, etc. With the local community. What's your emotional perception? Do you see them as founders, as potentially building the businesses like Facebook and Google?
Yeah. So I'd love to give some free advertising to the first company that I invested in here called Deal Loyal. This is a hardcore group of very passionate, programmers and no-nonsense entrepreneurs who are really attacking the loyalty market in a way that could go toe-to-toe with any company that I've seen in the Valley. I don't like to make cultural stereotypes, so it's
about entrepreneurs,
yeah,
not culture.
So what I would say is that from the folks that I've interfaced with here, the most important thing, and I'll stress the positives, is I think there is a genuine enthusiasm for company creation. It's not a given. I've been in plenty of places around the world where frankly, the idea of doing a startup versus getting going to a big corporate job is people think that's crazy. I don't see that here. In fact, I think that the founders that I've met here genuinely believe that they're part of a global founder community, like entrepreneurs that have basically taken the risk of not having a corporate job to build a company. So I think that's one thing that I see that's absolutely similar to other founders that I've seen all over the world. I think the other thing that I see is I'll just give you a really practical aspect, which I don't think is unimportant, but most people speak English very, very well here. I've spent a lot of time doing business. I'm Korean by birth. I've spent a lot of time doing business in Korea and China and Japan. And while there's absolutely a lot of bilingual speakers out there, what strikes me is that I can go into a room and have a conversation with two founders that I've met for the first time, and I almost have to catch myself and realize I'm in Lithuania. Maybe I should be asking, "Hey, how's your English?" But it doesn't happen at all. I think that's definitely a positive when you're looking at this from a global standpoint. The ability for a investor outside of Lithuania to be able to have a conversation in English without really a whole lot of translation issues, I think is pretty big. So I think the startup. My sense is that the entrepreneurs here are every bit as enthusiastic as entrepreneurs that I see anywhere else. I think they've got a lot of the skills already that they need in order to connect with global investors.
Awesome. Well, we got a few minutes left, so probably the audience might have a couple of questions for the guest. So if you raise your hands, please.